Let's get to the point and let's get to some meat. But I'm not only speaking to fathers, I guess, this morning, so we might do some of that. We'll leave you fathers for kind of the end, and then we'll open the water hose and really give it to you. So let's go ahead and turn to the book of Luke. Luke chapter 15. And the title of my message this morning is A Compassionate Father's Heart. I really don't know how to say everything this morning. I'm young, I have ideals, and I can be a little bit idealistic without any experience, very little experience. So I want you to understand that as we go into this. I want to be gracious with you. I want you to be gracious with me. I want your feedback if there are things that is not biblical or you name it, things that you disagree with. I welcome that. But we're not going to wait. Let's go ahead and get started. Luke chapter 15. I will be reading out of the New King James Version, and we'll kind of be doing a little bit of a stop and go. We'll read a few verses and then make some comments on those verses. And maybe a little bit before we get started, I want it to be applicable for everyone. The message, I want it to be, you make some connection for each person. And we will be talking about our physical fathers, but also those who have maybe not experienced their earthly father like we see in this example with the parable in Luke that Jesus gave. For you to know that fatherhood is given from Jesus, from God, to anyone who has felt abandonment or felt pain or rejection. God is that to you. And He extends His fatherhood to you. Let's begin in verse 11 of Luke chapter 15. Then He said, this is Jesus, a certain man had 2 sons, and the younger of them said to his father, Father, give me the portion of goods that falls to me. So He divided to them his livelihood. So again, this is a parable Jesus is teaching about a man who had 2 sons. We see there was a younger son and an older son. The younger asked his father, he said, the inheritance that is generally given to me at the end of your life. So he's actually asking his father for something that should not have been his until after his father died. That's typically how it worked then. He said, give it to me now. And in that time, the firstborn would have gotten a double portion of the inheritance. So there would have been 2 sons, there would have been 3 shares. The oldest son would have gotten 2/3, and the youngest son 1/3. And that's what he asked for. I don't know what his father had to do, whether he had to sell some possessions to give him the money or whatever he was going to give to him of that inheritance, that 1/3 share. We know that he did it in this parable that Jesus gave. Verse 13, and not many days after, the younger son gathered all together, journeyed to a far country, and there wasted his possessions with prodigal living. And the word prodigal means wasteful. Verse 14, so he left. Verse 14, but when he had spent all, we don't know how long this was, there arose, typical, right? A great famine in the land that he began to be in want. Then he went and joined himself to a citizen of that country and sent him into his fields to feed swine. And he would have gladly filled his stomach with the pods that the swine ate, and no one gave him anything. Verse 17, But when he came to himself, It's like he almost was in a different reality. When he actually came to himself, began seeing that he's in poverty, has no way out, he began to think of the things that he had previous. He thought to himself in 17, continuing, how many of my father's hired servants have bread enough to spare? And he's saying, here I am perishing. He was actually forced to reckon with this situation and reflect on what he had left. Verse 18, he finally comes down and says, I need to think of a plan. What am I going to do? So he sits down and says, okay, I will arise and go to my father. He's thinking to himself, this is what he's going to do. Seems like a major attitude change from when he left. And will say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you, and I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me one of your hired servants. So he thought this is probably the way he could, maybe the only way he could return. He's not really just saying, I'm sorry I left you. He's actually saying, I really messed up. You probably don't even want to call me your son anymore. I was a disgrace to you. And so that's what he's doing. He's thinking to go back. So he actually acted on it. Verse 20. And he arose and came to his father. But when he was still a great way off, his father saw him and had compassion and ran and fell on his neck and kissed him. And I love this, how it's, so we look at it, when he left, he had his pockets full, he probably had good clothes, anticipating he was going to have a great time, a blast, and leave, go into a far country. Now he's wasted everything, he's coming home, completely the opposite, in a wreck. Dirty clothes, probably no friends, no money. And his father has compassion. Verse 21, and the son said to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and in your sight, and I am no longer worthy to be called your son. It doesn't say, I don't know if he actually said anything about being a servant to him or not. At any rate, his father was overjoyed to have him back. And his father said in verse 22, but the father said to his servants, bring out the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his hand and sandals on his feet. So we have three things: the robe for his body, the ring for his hand, and the sandals for his feet. This was basically three ways of saying, you are my son. Because at that point, members of the family would have worn sandals. The servants would have been barefoot. The robe was a sign of acceptance and of status. And then the ring was not an ornament, but it was actually instead a brand mark placed on his hand. Kind of the same thing that Pharaoh did in Genesis when he placed Joseph as a ruler over his house and also the country. He placed gold and different things on him, and it was the same in this parable here. Continue in verse 23. So do those three things, and then also bring the fatted calf here and kill it, and let us eat and be merry, for this my son was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. And they began to be merry. We've heard this a lot, and it's a beautiful picture of what happens when sinners return to Christ. We don't know that if this was a situation that happened to us, we assume sometimes the worst. But to the son's father, he was as good as dead. He was gone. But now he says he is alive and is found. Moving on to the next section of verse 25, looking at the older son. Now his older son was in the field, and as he came and drew near to the house, he heard music and dancing. So he called one of his servants and asked what these things meant. And he said to him, "Your brother has come, and because he has received him safe and sound, your father has killed the fatted calf." And in that setting, again, the fatted calf was a symbol of festive rejoicing for someone's long-awaited return. Can we identify a little bit with this oldest son? In verse 28, the son, but he was angry and would not go in. Therefore his father came out and pleaded with him. So he answered and said to his father, "Lo, these many years I have been serving you. I never transgressed your commandment at any time. Yet you never gave me a young goat, that I may make merry with my friends as well. But as soon as this son of yours came, who devoured your livelihood with harlots, you killed the fatted calf for him." We understand why there was that anger, that feeling, from a human perspective. But that was a selfish attitude, because anytime a Christian, a sinner, repents and comes back to Christ, it is a celebration. It is something to be celebrated. Verse 31, and he said to him, this is the father to the son, "Son, you are always with me, and all that I have is yours." Again, that was because he had given the portion already to the younger son. "All that I have is yours. It was right that we should make merry and be glad, for your brother was dead and is alive again, and was lost and is found." Again, we've heard this parable many times, but I love how we can use it as a picture of God to us, to his people. God delights in forgiveness, and he wants to be the one to forgive. We can easily take our name, the names of the brothers out and place our names in their place. We've all done foolishly at some point in our lives, and we've done things that the wasteful son, the prodigal son, or the older brother has done as well. But we know how God handles this. He does not force us to follow him. It must be a choice that we need to own and say we will decide to follow God. I want to shift into some statistics. So we live in a fallen world. We recognize it. Might not be as visible and in our face here in this congregation, but we still have things that are coming up against us, and some of us have already faced these things. So a few statistics. 85%, according to the Texas Department of Corrections, 85% of youth who are currently in prison grew up in fatherless homes. National Public Radio says 24.7 million children, or about 1 in every 3 children in the United States, live in a home where their biological father is not present. U.S. Department of Justice, 75% of rapists are motivated by displaced anger that is associated with feelings of abandonment that involves their father. Again, the U.S. Department of Justice says 90% of the youth in the United States who decide to run away from home or become homeless for any reason originally came from a fatherless home. Around 50% of single mothers have never married. 29% are divorced. only 1 in 5 are either separated or widowed. And there's lots and lots and lots of statistics that we can go through. What does it mean? It doesn't. I mean, they're extreme to us. They're shocking, but it's not surprising. But as we look in statistics too, there are flaws. Okay, we look at statistics. There could be a father in the home, but he's not present at all, and so it's almost like there is not a father in the home. Or there's just different things where single-parent households, the child could live with the mother, and they still see their father regularly. So there's different aspects of that that's not true. We know, though, the power of a two-parent home. Mothers, your role is very important also. And it's not like there's one role that's more important than the other, but together the two roles of the mother and the father, the mother's comes along and complements the father. That the two together can be an expression and reflect the nature and person and the heart of God that neither one single role can do alone, completely. You may be a single mom, or you may have grown up in a home without a father present. And you say, what does this mean for me? A man's decision to abandon his family has placed remarkable amounts of pain in your life. And there are times that you find yourself acting out or responding in various ways that are negative because of past pain and hurt in your life that was placed there against your will or out of your control. There's things that you struggle with that people don't, that other people don't. But we need to remember and be encouraged because God delights in doing exceptional things in the lives of those who believe in Him. When you feel abandonment, God is going to help you do what needs to be done. The goal of the statistics that I read off are not to discourage you. Instead, it is, again, to open your eyes and remind you of these things, as well as so that you yourself can testify of the goodness of God. That's saying, God is doing a great work in me. It is not because of me. It is God within me. And that through the pain and anger and the bitterness that you've experienced, that you can clearly see the love of your Father in heaven when He sent His only Son, Jesus, to walk on the earth, to be mocked and ridiculed, and suffer death on the cross to redeem you, so that you may have a way to forgive the person and even love the person who so drastically hurt you. We want to acknowledge that pain to God. We want to ask for healing in our hearts and ask Him to show us ways that we're still being affected by that pain. Because Jesus came to redeem, He came to heal, to give us a new heart and to make us new creatures. Jesus said, He said, it did not come, He said, I did not come to call the righteous, but I came to call sinners to repentance, to give strength to the weak, to set the captive free, and restore a fallen humanity. Because of Jesus, we are not enslaved victims. Sometimes we are a victim, but we're not enslaved to that because of others' decisions. But we are victors by the grace of God, by surrendering our past and by crucifying our carnal nature every day to the lordship of Christ, remembering to take into captivity every thought, to make every thought obedient to Christ. Our natural reactions to fight or withdraw, those all remain. They come back over and over. But as we surrender, God gives us grace, and it will have to be again and again. Children and youth, we have to say a couple words to you. Of course, your favorite verse when you're bad is when your parents come out and tell you, children, obey your parents. You forgot to do your chores, and you say, children, obey your parents, and Lord, for this is right. Just remember to do that. It's in the Bible. Obey your parents. Honor your parents, your father and your mother. I believe we all recognize there's no shortage of males in our society. But is there a shortage of real godly men, strong men? We obviously understand when we look around that is majorly something that is under attack, manhood, especially godly manhood. I want to encourage us, men, do not give up, don't give in, and be strengthened by the power that God gives us. Support each other in our communities and focus on building strong families. And I want to say loudly, no apology, make no apology for teaching high values to your children that lay the groundwork and the foundation for a life of blessing for our children. And let's remember our own ideals, not to hold them tighter than we should. There's things that we want that probably will not happen. But let's give them to God. We are, fathers, the watchmen of our homes. God has given you that responsibility. And I want to say here too, many of us have come from churches, situations where the church kind of dictates more or less sometimes what we can do, the do's and the don'ts. We as fathers need to own every decision. There are going to be times, I don't speak with experience, I speak as third person looking on, the little experience that I have. There are times where there will be things that you will not be okay with, where you will kind of become the target, where earlier it might have been the church. Why do they require this of me? Well, it's you, Dad. Why do you require this of me? So what's it going to do? It's going to force you to come to give an answer, to search. And that's where we want to avail ourselves to more time in prayer. First of all, for my heart, that it can be sincere. And also, we want to lift our children to God, as in John chapter 4, where a Roman, I believe it was a Roman, he was in a high position of authority, and he went a long way, and he met Jesus, and he said, "Come heal my son. He's going to die. I think he's going to die." And he for his son, he brought him to Jesus' attention. He believed that he could heal him, and Jesus said, "Go home, your son will be healed." And he was. As fathers and as parents, we want to do the same thing. We want to bring our children to Jesus' attention. It's one thing that we can do. I'm young. I want to learn from those who are wiser, who are older, who have lived a lot more years than I have. One thing I do know, I believe you cannot build a deep relationship with your family, with your children, without spending time with them. Those of you who train animals, work with animals, I think you find it the same way. There is not a shortcut. It takes time to build trust and to gain their trust. And where does that start? Obviously, we have a window of time as fathers to influence and train our children. I love the window, the idea of the window of when the child is 1 until they turn 5. That is an unbelievable influential opportunity as fathers to build that strong relationship and foundation, and then continue that relationship on as you get older. We can't expect to suddenly them come into our world. They will join us in our world. We actually have to go to them and join them in their world. We need to spend time with them, have fun with them, bring their friends into your home and learn to know who they are. Who are your children spending time with? Some people, I hear it sometimes, would rather, and especially from maybe local communities, other people, not considering themselves Christians, would rather see their youth and people leave. Like, just get out for an evening so we can have a breather here, and go out, and they don't know what they're doing. But can we actually create an environment in our homes where we can bring them in? Can our homes be an environment of peace and of love, that we can influence them in that way, be involved in their life? We all know that anyone in a position of leadership or in authority of any type will make mistakes. But God is gracious. He's slow to anger, and He will not always scold us. Yet He won't keep His anger forever. Fathers, we make mistakes, but God delights to forgive. He wants to forgive. Just as the father of the prodigal son watched every day for his wayward son to return home, our Father awaits our return to Him. And sometimes He allows us we have to make a pretty big loop before we come back and realize that we need You, God. The family God has blessed you with, and some of you that God will bless you with, in my opinion, is your single most important ministry entrusted to you by God. Children grow up and they will make decisions, and they choose their way in life. We cannot control their decisions, not every decision. But let's start early and let's offer them to God continually. Again, just like the Roman official did. He pleaded to Jesus on the behalf of his son. All fathers desire to leave a legacy that lays a foundation for blessing for their children and for their children's children, so for generations. No one, actually, very few people, desire to leave one that enables the curse of sin to easily destroy. But it happens. It happens a lot. It's not that it's somebody's intention. But fathers, I want to encourage you again. You are the watchman of your house. Stay awake and be alert. Seek the kingdom of God. If you're doing a night watch, drink a cup of coffee. Whatever you have to do to stay awake. Stay in the Word. Get people around you to overcome the problems that you're experiencing. To lead is to serve. And by serving, you love. And out of love, you want to protect. We want to do this for our families. Our families are a unit that God has designed to pass on the baton of faith. Strong families create strong communities, strong churches, and we want to have that. Let us bow for a word of prayer. Our Father in heaven, you have made us in your own image and redeemed us through your Son, Jesus. Father, look with compassion on these families here. And Lord, take away the pride and hatred that so easily infect our hearts. And I ask that you will break down the walls that separate us and unite us in love. And work through our struggle and confusion to accomplish your purpose on earth, Father, that in your time we may all come together before your throne and worship you. I ask your blessing and strength upon each person here, Father. As it is Father's Day, we focus especially on fathers, Lord. But those who have not experienced your fatherhood, I pray that you would give it to them and that you will be the father of everyone. We commit each one to you today. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. Thank you very much.